Few remember Biafra, the tiny Western African nation that split off from southern Nigeria in 1967 and was retaken less than 3 years later. Much of the world learned of the enormity of that brief struggle through images of the mass starvation and disease that took the lives of possibly millions. None proved as powerful as British war photographer Don McCullen's picture of a 9-year-old albino child. To be a starving Biafran orphan was to be in a most pitiable situation, but to be a starving albino Biafran was to be in a position beyond description, McCullen wrote. Dying of starvation, he was still among his peers an object of ostracism, ridicule and insult. This photo profoundly influenced public opinion, pressured governments to take action, and led to massive airlifts of food, medicine and weapons. McCullen hoped that such stark images would be able to break the hearts and spirits of secure people. The same imperialistic desires festering in Europe in the 1930s had already swept into Asia. Yet many Americans remained wary of wading into a conflict in what seemed a far-off, alien land. But that opinion began to change as Japan's Army of the Rising Sun rolled toward Shanghai in the summer of 1937. Fighting started there in August, and the unrelenting shelling and bombing caused mass panic and death in the streets. But the rest of the world didn't put a face to the victims until they saw the aftermath of an August 28 attack by Japanese bombers. When H.S. Wong, a photographer for Hearst Metro Tone News nicknamed Newsreel, arrived at the destroyed South Station, he recalled carnage so fresh that my shoes were soaked with blood. In the midst of the devastation, Wong saw a wailing Chinese baby whose mother lay dead on nearby tracks. He said he quickly shot his remaining film and then ran to carry the baby to safety, but not before the boy's father raced over and ferried him away. In August 1955, Emmett Till, a black teenager from Chicago, was visiting relatives in Mississippi when he stopped at Bryant's Grocery in Meat Market. There he encountered Carolyn Bryant, a white woman. Whether Till really flirted with Bryant or whistled at her isn't known. But what happened 4 days later is. Bryant's husband Roy and his half-brother, J.W. Millam, seized the 14-year-old from his great-uncle's house. The pair then beat Till, shot him, and strung barbed wire and a 75-pound metal fan around his neck and dumped the lifeless body in the Tallahatchie River. A white jury quickly acquitted the men, with one juror saying it had taken so long only because they had to break to drink some pop. When Till's mother Mamie came to identify her son, she told the funeral director, "Let the people see what I've seen." She brought him home to Chicago and insisted on an open casket. Moments before American photojournalist Chris Hondros took this picture of Samar Hassan, the little girl was in the back seat of her family's car as they drove home from the Iraqi city of Tal Afar. Now Samar was an orphan, her parents shot dead by U.S. soldiers who had opened fire because they feared the car might be carrying insurgents or a suicide bomber. It was January 2005, and the war in Iraq was at its most brutal. Such horrific accidents were not rare in that chaotic conflict, but they had never been documented in real time. Hondros, who worked for Photo's website, was embedded with the Army unit when the shooting happened. He transmitted his photographs immediately, and by the following day they were published around the world. The terrified young boy with his hands raised at the center of this image was one of nearly 500,000 Jews packed into the Warsaw Ghetto, a neighborhood transformed by the Nazis into a walled compound of grinding starvation and death. Beginning in July 1942, the German occupiers started shipping some 5,000 Warsaw inhabitants a day to concentration camps. As news of exterminations seeped back, the ghetto's residents formed a resistance group. "We saw ourselves as a Jewish underground whose fate was a tragic one," wrote its young leader Mordecai Anielewicz.